Jelly Roll's wife, Bunnie XO, has built her brand on her larger-than-life, streetwise, liberated personality. But she's earned it the hard way, through years of struggling to survive in an unkind and unsympathetic world. In episodes of her podcast, Dumb Blonde, Bunnie XO gave some insight into how the actions of the mother figures in her life impacted her.
I don't really have a lot of good memories of my childhood, and I know that sounds terrible, but I didn't have a really good childhood.
She shared that her biological mother, an exotic dancer, left her young daughter and partner, Bunnie XO's father, when Bunnie was just 3 years old. She went on to say that her relationship with her stepmother, Michelle, was strained and abusive, and the scars from that painful experience deeply informed her behavior as a stepmother to Jelly Roll's daughter, Bailey. Speaking on the subject in an earlier episode, she said, "I learned from her that I did not want to be that woman. I never want to make a child feel the way my stepmother made me feel."
The coolest story that I could ever tell people is that I was raised by a single dad.
Despite the discord between them, Bunnie XO has some understanding of the circumstances that may have led to her stepmother's behavior, saying, "Michelle was young, you know. My dad's a old pervert. She was 17 when they got married."
It was a baby raising a baby, and, she came from a super abusive household.
In her early 20s, Bunnie XO reconnected with her biological mother through AOL chat, and the pair have since cultivated a relationship based on mutual understanding and respect. After fighting both verbally and physically with her stepmother, Bunnie XO realized that she was never going to feel at peace in her home environment. Her complicated relationship with her parents ultimately led to her decision to run away from home as a teenager. She recalled the story to her husband during her podcast.
I left home finally for my last final hoorah at 14.
She went on to describe her escape, saying, "I loaded a bag of clothes. My parents had my window nailed shut and I unscrewed it, had my girl Lisa waiting for me around the corner, and never went back home." Thinking back to the issues she faced with her stepmother at the time, she elaborated on the circumstances that led her to run away, sharing, "It was on my heart as a child at 14 that, you know what, I need to leave that situation. 1, to make my dad's life easier, and 2, to make my life easier because I was tired of fistfighting with this woman every day." Bunnie XO's experience with the education system was action-packed, to say the least. She had to change school districts a few times before her family eventually settled in Henderson, Nevada, just outside of Las Vegas. On her podcast, she admitted that she faced serious disciplinary action in junior high for fighting with other students. As she grew older, the fighting persisted, resulting in her expulsion from at least 2 schools. After a particularly brutal fight in the 10th grade that resulted in the principal having to sit on her to make her stop, she was permanently expelled from the public school system. Eventually, she got her GED, but her high school experience was over. Even so, Bunnie XO took a moment on her podcast to acknowledge the principal responsible for expelling her that fateful sophomore year.
He was so cool, Mr. Gunderson. Shout out if you're watching this. He was awesome. He was really a cool principal. He tried so hard to give me so many chances.
After leaving her parents' home, Bunnie XO worked as a lifeguard for 2 years and later worked as a mortgage broker in Las Vegas. But soon after starting that job, she realized that many of the women she worked with supplemented their income by dancing at clubs and decided to give dancing a try. At 19, she accompanied an associate of hers to a Vegas club called Cheetahs. She admits to having major stage fright that first night, but her nerves on stage were nothing compared to what she felt after receiving a lewd request later that evening. A man at the club offered her $700 to perform a kink act in the VIP room. Though Bunnie fled, her coworker took the man up on his offer. Following that first night, she took a step back, but she returned to dancing at 21. However, she kept a day job for years, citing her internal moral struggle on account of her religious upbringing. Before long, Bunnie was getting offers for paid intimacy, and she eventually became what she calls a high-class call girl.
There's no way to sugarcoat it. A prostitute is a prostitute, but there's different levels,
On her podcast, Bunnie reflected on a period in her life when she was heavily addicted to Xanax, a drug prescribed to patients suffering from generalized anxiety and panic disorder. Due to its sedative effects and the speed at which the body builds up tolerance, Xanax has become one of the most heavily abused drugs in the years since its initial boom in popularity.
I did drugs probably from the time I was 14 till I was 36.
Bunnie recounts the horrors of her addiction and subsequent recovery, admitting, "There was a time in my life when I was super addicted to Xanax. I'm talking about overdosing twice on it." She explained that the time in her life made her truly appreciate her biological mother, who also struggled with drug abuse, and who offered emotional support during that dark period. She recalled, "I would call my mom when I finally made the conscious decision to get off of it. I called my mom every night at like 2 or 3 in the morning, just bawling my eyes out, and I even told her I don't want to end up like you, and she was just there for me." Bunnie XO is proud of her transparency about her past, not only with her fans and listeners, but with her husband as well. She made it clear during an episode of her podcast that Jelly Roll was fully aware of the nature of her career and her relationship history before they ever got together.
How many times have you been married?
How many times have I been married?
In fact, during her interview episode of Dumb Blonde, Jelly Roll seemed to remember more about his wife's past marriages than she did, to their mutual amusement. Starting with her first marriage, Bunnie XO admitted that the only reason she got married was to earn sympathy from a judge, as the husband in question was on trial and about to be sentenced to prison time. The plan didn't work, however, and her new husband went to prison anyway. They stayed married while he was locked up, but after his release, they decided it wasn't going to work and divorced. Years later, she married her second husband, and they stayed together for 5 years. The marriage eventually broke down due to her husband's lack of ambition and personal accountability. One of the darkest and most gut-wrenching tragedies of Bunnie XO's life was the intensity of the abuse she endured at the hands of the man she was involved with when she met Jelly Roll. Bunnie recounts the extent of the life-threatening physical, mental, and emotionally degrading harm she endured during that relationship in her podcast. In the interview, she paints a heartbreaking picture of the suffering she faced and eventually overcame with time, distance, and healing. Bunnie XO shared her experience to shed light on the pervasiveness of domestic violence in the world today, but also to offer hope to anyone who finds him or herself in a similar situation. She also wanted to address anyone still suffering from the wounds left behind by abusive partners, whether they be visible, physical scars, or emotional and mental markers on the minds and hearts of survivors. Bunnie XO described in detail the isolation and control her former partner had over her, and further recalled the extensive injuries he inflicted, including a crushed larynx that nearly ended her life. Jelly Roll, who very gently and conscientiously conducted this segment of their interview, commended his wife for her strength, perseverance, and determination to seek help and healing. One persistent misconception that Bunnie XO has had to deal with since the onset of her husband's fame is that people believe that she's only attracted to him for his wealth and success. But the facts of the matter prove otherwise. Bunnie XO and Jelly Roll met at a point in time when she was way more financially successful and stable than he was. When they were first introduced to one another, Jelly Roll was a struggling artist living out of rental vehicles and couch surfing. Meanwhile, Bunnie XO had her own home, cars, and expendable income.
She helped finance addiction kills. She helped hire a lawyer to get custody of my daughter. She got me a place. I didn't have a place. I was homeless.
Knowing this, it's no surprise that she takes offense at the accusation of being a gold digger or a groupie. Fame and fortune were never at the root of their connection. In fact, Bunnie XO explains that upon meeting Jelly Roll for the first time, she saw something in him that really made her want to know him better, telling him, "When I met you, I can't describe that feeling, and it's not like people are probably like, oh yeah, she's really putting it on. He is not my type. I never knew who he was, so I definitely wasn't a groupie. I had my own money. I had my own life going on."
The day I met him, I just knew that we were going to be something.
In 2017, in the midst of Jelly Roll's ex-partner's struggle with addiction, Bunnie XO helped her husband gain custody of his daughter, Bailey. Bunnie has made her tender feelings for her stepdaughter known, confessing that Bailey has completely won her heart and that being her stepmother is a joy and privilege. Though the journey toward becoming a cohesive blended family was rocky at times, Bunnie and Bailey have built a tight bond with one another through their shared experiences. Bunnie's compassion for Bailey's struggle with her mother's situation, especially considering her own past with addiction, has brought the two of them closer. Bunnie reflects on the growth of her and Jelly Roll's relationship with Bailey in an episode of her podcast, saying, "When we first got Bailey, she wanted nothing to do with us. Her mom was feeding her a bunch of about Jelly Roll and just, was doing things a mom shouldn't do to kids. We really had to earn Bailey's respect, and I've watched Jade literally go through leaps and bounds to just prove to that little girl that he's never going to let her down."
She changed my life, man. I wanted to be a father.
Independence is a quality that Bunnie XO takes incredibly seriously, especially financial independence. Given her long history of fending for and supporting herself, it's extremely important for her to maintain a firm grasp on not only her own money, but on her merit and earning ability as well. In the spirit of transparency, she told Jelly Roll how she felt, and he accepted her despite the nature of her profession. In a Facebook post Bunnie shared to explain her career timeline in relation to her marriage, she wrote, "I have always worked and made money on my own. When I married Jay, I refused to give up my independence and rely solely on him. And to be honest, he never once asked me to. He knew how important it was to me to make my own money."
She was, really making money in the sex work industry, like real money. Like I didn't know that existed.
Though Jelly Roll did encourage Bunnie to diversify her career interests, it wasn't to get her out of sex work for his own comfort. Bunnie spoke about the importance of having an exit strategy for people who work in some of the less sustainable fields of the adult industry. She explained that it's hard to understand the necessity of having a plan for the future when everyone makes as much money as she was making in the field. However, like all careers, there comes a time when retirement is imminent, and a plan for next steps needs to be in place for when that time arrives.